Imagine you were standing in a room with the 9 most powerful central bankers on Earth. On the table between you is a digital clock. It isn't measuring time, it's measuring the global debt clock. The number currently sits at over $315 trillion. That is more than 3 times the value of every single good and service produced by every human being on the planet in a single year. If we stopped eating, stopped buying clothes, and stopped heating our homes, if every person on Earth gave every cent they earned to the collectors, it would still take us 3 generations to pay it off. And here is the uncomfortable truth that keeps the lights on in Manhattan, London, and Tokyo. We aren't even trying to pay it back. In fact, if we ever did pay it back, the entire world as you know it would cease to exist. Your bank account would vanish, your local grocery store would empty, the global economy would physically evaporate. Because in the modern world, money isn't gold, it isn't even paper. Money is debt. To understand why the world never runs out of debt, you first have to understand that the repayment of debt is a mathematical impossibility by design. Most of us think of debt like a car loan. You borrow $10,000, you pay it back over 5 years with a bit of interest, and the debt dies. The slate is clean. But global economics doesn't work like your Honda Civic. In the macro system, when a government or a massive bank wants to create new money, they don't just print it and throw it out of helicopters. They issue a bond. A bond is a fancy word for an IOU. When the government issues a bond, they're essentially saying, I don't have this money yet, but I promise to pay it to you in the future. A central bank then buys that promise by typing numbers into a computer. Poof! New money enters the system. But notice the trap. The bank created the principal, the original amount, but they didn't create the interest. If the government borrows $100 at 5% interest, they owe $105 back. But there is only $100 in existence. To find that extra $5 to pay the interest, the government has to borrow more money, which creates more interest, which requires more borrowing. It's a game of musical chairs where the music never stops because the person playing the piano is the one who owes the chairs. We have built a civilization that is effectively a giant, sophisticated, high-speed treadmill. We have to keep running, keep borrowing, just to stay in the same place. If we stop, we fall off the back. Now, you might ask, who are we even borrowing from? If every country is in debt, who is the planet's banker? Mars? The answer is both boring and terrifying. We are borrowing from the future. Debt is simply the act of pulling tomorrow's consumption into today. When you take out a mortgage, you are saying, I want to live in this house now, using the money I haven't earned yet from the next 30 years of my life. On a global scale, we are doing the same thing. We are building high-speed rails, funding wars, and subsidizing healthcare, using the productivity of people who haven't been born yet. The reason the world never runs out of debt is that we are infinitely creative in imagining how much more productive our grandchildren will be. We assume that as long as the structure of the economy grows, the debt doesn't matter. It's like a person who weighs 200 pounds and has 50 pounds of gear. If they grow to be a 500-pound giant, that 50 pounds of gear starts to feel like a feather. But there is a flaw in this logic. Growth requires resources, it requires energy, it requires more people. For the last 100 years, this worked perfectly. The population exploded. We found oil. We invented the internet. We grew so fast that the massive debts of the 1940s look like pocket change today. We outgrew the debt. But look around. The population in the developed world is shrinking. Energy is becoming more expensive to extract. Innovation is hitting diminishing returns. We are still issuing the IOUs, but the future we are borrowing from is starting to look a lot smaller than we promised it would be. This is where the irony turns into a crisis. In a healthy system, debt is a tool. You use it to build a factory that makes more money than the debt cost. But we have moved past that. We are now using debt to pay the interest on the debt we took out 10 years ago. Economists call this Ponzi finance. When a system reaches this stage, it can't be fixed by frugality. If a government suddenly decided to be responsible and pay off its debt, it would have to suck trillions of dollars out of the economy. That money would come from your paycheck, your pension, and your business. The economy would collapse into a black hole of deflation. So the leaders have a choice: total collapse today or more debt tomorrow. They choose tomorrow every single time. They do this through a process that sounds dignified but is essentially a shell game. They roll over the debt. When a bond comes due, they don't pay it with tax money. They just issue a new, bigger bond to pay off the old one. The debt isn't a mountain we are trying to climb. It's a foundation we are building on top of. If you remove the foundation, the house falls. So we just keep adding more concrete to the bottom, hoping the ground beneath us doesn't turn to mud. This brings us to the ultimate hidden mechanism: inflation. Since we can't realistically pay the debt back in real value, the system has a built-in escape hatch. If the government owes you $100 and they can't find $100, they can simply make $100 worth less than it was when they borrowed it. If a loaf of bread costs $1 today and $2 tomorrow, the government's debt is effectively cut in half. This is why your grandfather could buy a house for the price of a used Toyota. It's not just that things got more expensive, it's that the debt-based system requires the currency to lose value so the old debts remain payable. The world never runs out of debt because the debt is the very air the system breathes. To cure the world of debt would be like curing a human of oxygen. But here is the question no one wants to answer at those high-level meetings. Every system in nature has a limit. Every lung has a capacity. Every bridge has a maximum load. We have spent the last 80 years convinced that the rules of nature don't apply to the rules of the financial structure. We believe that as long as we keep the treadmill moving, as long as we keep rolling over the promises, the bill will never actually come due. We have created a world where the only thing keeping us from total ruin is our collective agreement to keep pretending that tomorrow has infinite pockets. We aren't running out of debt because we've discovered the secret to infinite wealth. We aren't running out of debt because we've lost the ability to live without it. So, as the clock on that wall ticks past 316 trillion, 317 trillion, 320 trillion, ask yourself this: what happens when the people we are borrowing from, the people of the future, finally show up and realize we've already spent their lives?